I want to jump right into what's happening in the Middle East. Give me your take on where we are in this and what might likely happen.
Well, last night, Donald made a sort of classically imprudent post on his Truth Social that certainly created the reasonable assumption that a nuke was going to be dropped on Tehran. Everybody should evacuate immediately. And there's no weapon that would require a whole city of millions of people to evacuate except a nuclear weapon. Now, that's apparently not what's going on, but I think it's indicative of Donald's incompetence and his failure to understand the significance of the words from whoever is at the top. And it isn't any organization that's true. I mean, if you work for a corporation, the top person's words get scrutinized and reacted to very quickly. We're more likely than not to see this tit for tat between Israel and Iran get worse. Netanyahu is working very hard to hold on to his position. And remember, he's facing serious prison time if convicted of the corruption charges. And the Iranians seem to be somewhat tone deaf to what's going on around them in the world. The Iranian enmity for the U.S. is entirely our fault. We earned it, and we're getting the result of it. But this is not good, and it's clearly got the Saudis spooked. And they're the country with whom we are, politically and with Trump most heavily aligned, along with the Qataris, who host our major Middle East military command.
I was saying earlier, David, that the idea that's been articulated and sort of thought to be the plan on the part of Iran is to develop this nuclear capability and then to actually export it to surrogates like the Houthis and even Hezbollah in Lebanon, although that they've been degraded substantially. But the idea was that was the blueprint, and that the Israelis, at least this is their claim, that they have to derail this now because of Iran's weakness in this moment. Iran has also not the strength that they had even a year ago, right?
Right. Well, okay, so a couple of things here. The good news is let me do the bad news first. The bad news is you don't need to build a nuclear bomb to create havoc. You can create a dirty bomb. All you need to do is spread long-lasting elements. The good news is that we have incredibly detailed radioactive background maps of the entire U.S. and most of the world. So if somebody wants to move nuclear materials, we're capable of noticing that and tracking it. So you don't need to worry that somebody's going to go walking through Market Street in San Francisco or Midtown Manhattan spreading some kind of nuclear material. They'll get spotted immediately. This all came out when the Olympics were coming to LA, and I wrote about this in the LA Times and some magazines back in the 1984. I'm not sure if I actually got it in the LA Times, because a lot of my stuff I wanted to do then about nuclear threats was cut, but I wrote in some magazines on the side about this, what's called NEST, Nuclear Emergency something team. The Israelis, of course, clearly have nuclear weapons. I mean, they won't say one way or the other. They're being coy about it. They clearly have nuclear weapons. Any use of nuclear weapons is going to change the whole world political environment. And I've warned as far back as the early 1980s that if we end up with any kind of a nuclear contest back and forth, doesn't have to be the major powers, the risk we would run is of the imposition of a global military dictatorship to control those weapons. And so we should be very concerned about any effort by any country to use nuclear weapons. And the military, at least before Pete Hegseth, I have no idea under him what's going on, does all sorts of gaming of potential conflicts. My daughter, who's Rod Serling's biographer, found out that he had been involved in nuclear gaming along with some other creative people from Hollywood in 1960, and they did a scenario that is eerily like Osama bin Laden 40 years later. And in gaming these things out, they've looked at all these kinds of scenarios. I mean, they apparently have even done what if Santiago and Buenos Aires had nuclear weapons and went after each other as a gaming exercise. And the conclusion of a lot of these things is that anybody who breaks with what's been the tradition since Nagasaki in the summer of 1945 would create global pressure to impose some kind of global military dictatorship to control weapons like that. Of course, there are other kinds of weapons. You can weaponize pernicious viruses. You can weaponize bacteria. So the focus, I think, in the world really needs to be on, we've got to get past war.
Sure.
It's been part of human culture from day one, but we need to somehow begin to move people past this and to think in terms of building a better world, not in terms of your military control and authority.
Well, that's such a great goal. It seems as though at least this country is going the other way. America. I mean, we're not building coalitions. In the first week that Donald Trump took office, he was smack talking the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Chinese. I mean, it was he's going to either invade Greenland or buy it. I mean, I don't mean to have Trump derangement syndrome, but just in response to what David Cay Johnston is saying, it doesn't seem as though the posture is anti-war. It seems quite confrontational.
Well, Donald has used more than $500 million worth of bombs on the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and it hasn't affected what they're doing. And that's not surprising if you've read at least the summaries of the bombing studies done at the end of World War II, which concluded that all the bombing, and remember, we firebombed Dresden. That's what one of Kurt Vonnegut's novels is about. We turned Tokyo, a wooden city, into a city of nothing but ashes. And the military officials who studied the bombing in World War II concluded it was a waste of time and money. It was not successful. People kept producing, and some of them died, but it was not effective. Hitler made a huge mistake when he put all that money into the V-1, which was sort of the prototype for cruise missiles, and then the V-2 rocket, which had almost no effect. The V-2s, didn't even carry a payload. It was the unburnt fuel that was the damage. And if he put that money instead into building, tanks and bombers, he might have fighter planes. I'm sorry, he might have had slowed down the eventual loss of the war from his side. I mean, thank goodness he made these stupid decisions. But we in the rest of the world, Donald Trump is seen as this crazy man who's not to be trusted. I've said on your show since about March 1st that Donald is effectively our dictator. He's just consolidating power. That's accepted wisdom when I'm on TV programs in Europe. Yeah, America is no longer a free country. America is a fascist dictatorship. And I don't understand how Americans haven't woken up to this enough, how they don't realize that, for example, having masked men with no insignia grab people off the street. I will be shocked if we don't find out that at least one young woman has been ripped off the street by sexual predators.
It's already happened. We found.
Oh, it has. Okay.
Oh, yes, it's happened.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, and you've noted that in prior conversations, and you're absolutely right. It's happening.
Yeah, and it's so. This is really terrible, and I'm shocked that frankly the turnout in the parade in the demonstration Saturday, depending on who you talk to, it was 5 million people or 11 million people. There's not really a good count, but it's not enough. If you want to change the country, you need at least 3.5% of the population to turn out. Well, that's 12 to 15 million people, depending on how you want to count. And we're not getting enough people there. Now, some of the MAGA voters are having buyer's remorse. Voters' remorse. And we're seeing that. But all of this is sort of on the margin. Oh, please don't take our farm workers or our slaughterhouse workers. It's not, hey, something is really, really wrong here. And unfortunately, you have this weakling, Mike Johnson, as speaker, and this other weakling, John Thune, the senator from the Dakotas, who is the majority leader in the Senate. And they lack any spine whatsoever to stand up to Donald Trump. I mean, this is so much so that Mike Lee, the super conservative, right wing, very fascistic in his views, senator from Utah, blamed liberals for the assassinations and attempted assassinations in Minnesota when the guy is a Trumper through and through. So there's no regard for fact. There's no regard for the well-being of ordinary people. And today in the New York Times, there's a remarkable piece of reporting. Starts on the front page, entire page inside, and half of another page about what's going on at Social Security. And it is, you can get, if you just register at nytimes.com, you can get 10 free articles a month. Go sit down and read this piece. It will tell you what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they don't care about facts. You know, you've seen Jeanine Pirro saying there's 2-year-olds and 6-month-old babies getting Social Security. Obviously, it's fraud. No, they're orphans. There are people in Social Security database who are 300 years old. Yeah, that's why nobody's getting paid. Those were very inexpensive and effective.
Talking points, propaganda. I mean, and it's dominating the news cycle. You know, David, you see it in the cabinet appointments. These are people who are on television. I was noting that Hegseth was on Fox News Channel last night. This is at the same time that Donald Trump has to, run out of the G7 and get back to Washington and meet with his cabinet officials. Oh, one of them's, though, over at the studios right now doing a talking head with Fox News Channel. I mean, it's and most of that, by the way, was celebrating the Army anniversary and the parade. Most of that interview was about that. So it wasn't even in reference to the crisis so much. But they have a premium on that propaganda you're talking about. I want to ask you.
Did you tell your audience about the fact that there were ads offering people money to fill the stands at the parade on Saturday? The stands were still pretty empty because what they offered people was a cryptocurrency of some kind, apparently. But if you look at the videos, very few people turned out for this parade. Very few.
Oh, I mean, the whole thing was, and of course, the latest news out of that is that Trump was excoriating Hegseth and angry that the parade wasn't a greater success, and he really laid it all at the feet of Hegseth.
That's because Donald's never responsible for anything that goes wrong, only things that go right.
A miserable idea. I wanted to ask just a question that had been in the chat about the 3.5% rule, that if you can just get 3.5% of the population out, that you can build a political change. There it is. Curious about David Cay Johnston's thoughts on protest numbers. 5 million people is 1.5% of the country. Doesn't seem like a whole lot. Look up the study on 3.5% protest rule. Can you talk to Billy about that?
Well, there's some statistical evidence political scientists have put together showing that that's sort of the tipping point number of the crowd you needs to turn out. But we have to have massive turnouts way beyond what we saw on Saturday if there's going to be any change. This is not going to scare the Republicans into finding wherever they parked their spines, if assuming they had one, or their morality or their courage. It's just not enough to change that. So whether it's 3.5% or it's 10%, it should be shocking to us that so few Americans are reacting the way they are. I mean, if you are a Christian, to be clear, I'm not a believer, all right? But I've been a consultant to 5 major denominations and spoken repeatedly at some of the biggest and best divinity schools in America on moral issues. But if you're a Christian, how can you possibly support this ripping parents away from their children who've committed no offense, this conspiracy, and that's what it is, by the government to, you show up for your court hearing, the administrative law judge dismisses the case so they can arrest you and you step into the hallway. ICE literally left a 3-year-old child at least once in the back of a vehicle while hauling off the mother. If you or I did that when we were the parent, we could well be prosecuted for that. And there are people who nobody can find them. They basically have been disappeared. And I don't want to mislead people. I don't think that we're doing like Argentina did, throwing people out of airplanes at 18,000 feet over the ocean. But there are people who the system can't find, and lawyers saying, where's this person? And they're not getting responses, or not for days. If you're a Christian, this should be unbelievably offensive to you. You're supposed to welcome the stranger. You're supposed to take care of the unfortunate. You're supposed to have regard, that word I want to get back in our public conversation, regard for the other. And at the same time, you're seeing a flourishing of all sorts of craziness. Kim Boren sent me a little note about the vote result lawsuit going on in Rockland County, New York. And I would just point out that the lawsuit's brought by followers of the late Lyndon LaRouche, who I would characterize as crazies.
Right. But I would love to double back to that another time. There were potential revelations from that lawsuit, or potential pieces of information that might be worthwhile, or maybe they all fall into the category of crazy. But I'd love to talk about it another time.
The lawsuit will be further along in September when the next big court hearing is held.
Yeah. I wanted to just mention to you this Tulsi Gabbard thing, because Trump has gone back against her, essentially. And her position is that Iran was not actively pursuing a nuclear weapon. Okay. She's head of intelligence, right?
Right.
And Trump, when confronted with this, says, I don't care what Tulsi Gabbard said. I think they are very close to having one. And wondering if Gabbard, who is in over her head to begin with, as you have pointed out before, wondering if it will matter, or maybe this doesn't move the meter at all. I mean, Trump's his own guy, the expert on everything, as you've said. So I don't know that he even pays attention to any of this stuff.
Well, he doesn't understand the things because he doesn't have the broader education and context to put these things in context. The New York Times piece I mentioned about Social Security actually goes to this Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump dust-up, because the opening anecdote is about how Trump had said that because Elon Musk told him this, 40% of the calls to Social Security phone lines were scammers. And this middle-level bureaucrat who they put in as temporary head of Social Security because he agreed he'd do whatever Donald wanted, said, well, that's not true. Whereupon he gets a screaming phone call from Katie Miller at the White House saying, you never contradict the president. 40% of the calls are scams. Facts and reality have no bearing on what Trump is going to do. People need to keep that in mind. And if he gets the last person who spoke to him puts in his head some crazy idea, we better drop a bunker buster bomb on the Iranian parliament the next day they're going to meet. Or maybe we should bomb their holiest of synagogue of mosques in the religious city whose name I can't remember at the moment in Iran. He may do something like that. I mean, he's a loose cannon. He doesn't know anything. He has no sense of how to get events to happen in the world. And of course, we're all seeing, the Ukraine war is not over after one day. Gaza continues. People continue to be not able to get food or medicine at levels that are needed to sustain the society. And in Africa, where we were the biggest trading partner with many of the countries in Africa, now the Chinese are, and they are replacing us in humanitarian aid so that people will love Beijing, the communist dictatorship in Beijing, not the United States of America. He's destroying the world as we've known it. And I don't get that people aren't waking up to this and saying, we got to do something. We got to remove this guy.
I mean, I think that the people who show up on Saturday and no King's marches, etc., the fever is intense.
Yes.
The anger is intense. The reality is hitting all of us. But we silo so beautifully now in this new media environment that, again, I don't know that the Joe Rogan show is doing much on this. And to be fair to Joe Rogan, I think he has come out against some of these deportations and just how people are scooped up and deported. but it's a slow process of any of that stuff ever making it through like the Fox News Channel ecosphere.
Well, in fact, I watch Fox so that you don't have to from time to time. And it is astonishing that CNN and MSNBC will be talking about some important Trump issue, and you turn to Fox and it's about something completely irrelevant to all of that because it's an issue that's troublesome for Trump. And if I only watched Fox, Breitbart, One America News, I would think things are fantastic, that our Lord and Savior has emerged in the person of Donald Trump, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. It's just astonishing, the disconnect between reality and what these places are doing.
It also, but I think, and I'm so glad that you made the point earlier in this conversation, it's so relevant that his party is checked out. His party has enabled all of this. So you see nothing but this supplicance that has just permitted his extensive power to flex in ways that he never thought perhaps, or maybe he wanted to, but never had achieved in term one, season one.
Well, and also in season two here, term two, he has surrounded himself with zealots who are finding ways to do all sorts of things that are illegal or dubious. And they're flooding with so many things going on. There's no way anybody can keep track of all of them. But they are working very hard on making sure that your ability to get recompense if you're wronged by a corporation or by the government is being diminished. That your children will listen, like it or not, to a brand of Christianity when they go to public school, at least in some states, that you will not have access to books in the library. And this is such a childish administration that 2 weeks ago we saw Caroline Leavitt, the 20-something White House press secretary, say that the Librarian of Congress was removed because of books they were giving children. You can't even get in the building unless you're 16 years old. It was absurd. And by the way, there's some arguments being made. I think I put one of them on my Facebook feed by librarians that this removal of the Librarian of Congress is much more significant than you might think because of its attack on intellectual property and on ideas. I'm not sure I'm totally sold on it, but I think it's an interesting idea to watch. And just keep in mind that the people around Trump who were most loyal to him, they have no interest in democracy. By the way, yesterday, the day before, someone sent me a series of clips from someone who'd gone out to interview people on the street who are Trumpers. And I was astonished at a number of them who said, I don't care if Donald Trump kills people. That's fine. He could walk out of the White House and shoot somebody and I'd still want him to be president. Yeah, Donald should be our dictator. We'd be better off with a dictator. My goodness, what in the world?
Yeah. I mean, this really is a cult. It is cultism. And, you've covered this guy so many years, decades, covering Donald Trump. And, you can, as I've mentioned, look at David's books through the years and you see the brute force with which he tries to negotiate and navigate business. And at the same time, it must be some charm. You've called him the greatest con man,
Yeah, he's the greatest con man in the history of the world. And notice something else going on here. The Senate Republicans are not going along with the House on the big, beautiful, or as I would call it, big, ugly bill. But Donald said he was going to stop taxing Social Security. Now, I get Social Security, so I have an interest here, all right? But Ronald Reagan put in taxing Social Security as part of his massive shift where he's remembered by millions of Americans as the guy who cut taxes. They forget that he 11 times raised taxes on working class, middle class, upper middle class people. And one of them was taxing your Social Security benefits if you make more than an incredibly small income. Well, that's nowhere in either bill in the House or Senate. They just sort of, we're not doing that. If there was any reform that could, in the long run, help the Republicans gain votes, it would be saying we're not going to tax your Social Security benefits, or putting in a new rule that says, yeah, we start taxing them when you make $500,000, $1 million a year, something like that, where the benefits therefore are irrelevant to your financial well-being. And there's so much going on that even if you diligently get up every morning, as I do, and I look at 8 newspapers online and I get the New York Times home delivered here in Rochester, New York, you can't follow everything, but they're not doing what they got elected to do.
Sure.
That's the key thing people need to, and the Democrats really need to, they need more Congressman Stansberry's, more Elizabeth Warren's. They need to find some younger leaders to deal with their gerontocracy problem.
Sure.
People my age
Although
should not be in the leadership. It should be people your age.
Yeah, it's true. Let me just speak for older boys and girls. Bernie Sanders is amazing. I mean, Bernie Sanders, you saw the latest polling, David, on trusted figures in American politics. Bernie Sanders is number 1.
He is. And the problem with Bernie, and I know I've known Bernie for many years, I got to speak to him briefly in Washington in February, is he's a great person to raise issues and to rabble-rouse. He's a terrible manager. He's just a terrible manager. And the job of being president is fundamentally being a manager. And we need to keep that in mind. But the Democrats need to find leaders. Human beings are herd animals. We follow leaders. People followed Mussolini. They followed Hitler. They followed Ronald Reagan. If you listened carefully to what he said, hey, by the way, I want to destroy the New Deal that created this prosperous middle class, and I want rich people to be much better off.
Yeah, but it's the way he said it.
It's the way he said it. And here's Donald Trump, who's saying, I'm going to destroy this for everybody who isn't super rich already. I'm going to make you give up all sorts of government benefits that makes the system work so that people who already have $1 billion can pay even less in taxes. And he's getting people to follow him. The Democrats have got to find leaders. It's not going to be AOC. She is the young rabble-rouser version of Bernie, and she's really good. I would love to see Katie Porter emerge as that leader, but I don't think that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. She might become governor of California. That would be a frankly good thing for California. But somebody, whether it's Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Pete Buttigieg, somebody we haven't even heard about. The Democrats need to find a couple of leaders who are younger, who are incredibly thoughtful, and who can talk to people at their own level. That's a crucial element in this, is talking to people at a level that they understand.
I also think that there's so many things that the libs stand for that poll very well. Especially as right. I mean, so I don't understand why we have this recoiling from either the liberal agenda and getting it out there and speaking about it, or even the label.
Well, because of the history of this country, there is sort of a knee-jerk reaction against popular liberal ideas. Remember, when there was an effort to get child labor laws in the beginning of the last century, and the first set of child labor laws were thrown out by the Supreme Court, there were literally ministers, because I've read articles about their lectures, who would go around saying, it is God's plan that these 5-year-old children work in the factories, and those who oppose this are the agents of the devil. I mean, there's no bad idea that you can't find religious leaders out there pushing, including that slavery is the right thing to do.
Sure.
And there are still people in this country pushing ideas like that. So I really don't believe, Mark, we're going to see significant change until red state voters, who are the ones who rely most on government for funding of their medical benefits, their Social Security, et cetera, that until terrible things happen to people, and I shouldn't have to come to this, but people need to react on a visceral level.
Sure.
You're not going to organize people around the intellectual ideas you and I are talking about. They have to hit people at a visceral level, in their gut.
That's why the economy usually cuts through, for the same reason. J.B. Pritzker has pointed out that from Illinois, he's another one who is sort of a rising star within the party, might have that presidential stuff. And Champagne Wishes says you need someone who's going to win the middle of the country, which is kind of what you're saying. The red states have to jump on board.
And J.B. Pritzker, you know, if you're going to say, well, he's fat, well, so's Donald. And he's a billionaire. The Pritzkers are very, very wealthy as a family. But he certainly has shown that he has a moral core. And that's something that's not only missing from Donald, but he's managed to suppress or extinguish it in the leaders of the Republican Party. In the long run, assuming we keep our democracy, assuming we're able to put a stop to what Trump's doing, and that's not certain at this point, the Republicans should pay a terrible price for what's happened here. They should go the way of the Whigs in 1856. After the presidential election in 1856, nobody ever heard of the Whigs again because they got it wrong on the Civil War. But so far, that's not what we're seeing. And the notion that Donald keeps saying, you know, now we're respected around the rest of the world, absolute nonsense. And I'll tell you that as somebody who does overseas TV now 5-6 times a week. And I just listen to the tone of how the questions have changed over the last year. And it's not friendly to Trump anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rest of the world looks at America and just scratches their collective heads. We're running out of time. We're really out of time, so I'm not going to hold you, but I do want to pick up on this next time. It's funny what we've ended up with, which is a question of, you know, voters and when they'll realize certain things and what America is really about, you know, the hate that is in America, the divided nature of our politics. That is something that we were talking about in the first hour as sort of baked in all along the way in that Stephen Hahn book, which I recommend as well. It's really terrific. And it points to the fact that this isn't a new thing. You know, David, we have to overcome something that is so much in the texture of who we are as a country. It's a tall task, I guess.
Absolutely. And just don't forget, there's many societies, Native Americans and others, argue that it takes 7 generations for a complete turnover of an idea because the handing down of ideas. I mean, you don't know your great-great-great-grandparents, and it'd be extraordinary if you knew your great-grandparents. But many of the people who came and settled this country from Europe came here because they were excluded from the guilds, the proto-unions of the past. And so, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of antipathy to unions built into the culture. People who can't tell you why, just unions bad. As Pope Francis said, there is no economic justice without unions, because ordinary people don't have any economic power except as a group. And until we overcome that, we're going to continue to see wages not keeping pace with inflation, not keeping pace with productivity, and the resources being redistributed to the people already at the very top who have more than they can ever consume.
It just stands to reason that as a collective, you have more power. And so it is. Thanks so much for allowing us to go over time. Great to talk to you, and look forward to next week. David Cay Johnston, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.